Welcome to The Crafty Chemist. I'm Maggie Workman, The Crafty Chemist. Thank you for joining me here today for our project. We are going to be making waterfall cards. I just love waterfall cards. When I first saw these, I really could not figure out how they were made, and I just had to give it a try. So you need to use the Waterfall die cut set. It is in the core catalog, and it's item number Z3777, and it is $39.95 US dollars. So you can see it comes with these 6 thin cuts, the base piece, and then the decorative pieces. It also comes with instructions on how to put this all together. So let's get started. I am going to use this bright pink for my base. So I take the base thin cut and put it face down where the ridges go down. I'm also going to tape it down with some purple tape because I don't want it to move at all when it goes through the die cutting machine. And you will see why in a minute, but this thin cut is fairly long, and it is longer than the base plate on my machine. And so I'm going to have to run it through twice, run it through halfway, and then move the piece up and then run it through the rest of the way. So I don't want it to move, so I'm going to use this purple tape to keep it down. Purple tape is great because it sticks the die down, but it won't rip the paper whenever you pull it up. So it's great to use for this kind of project. Okay, I get out my die cutting machine, and I have a hand crank version. Put down the base plate, and now put down my paper with the thin cut on top, and then put the top plate on and run it through the machine. So I'm going to crank it through until I get to the bottom of the plates, and you can see there's part of it that is left, so I'm going to rewind it there, and then take my paper and just slide it down a little bit so that the bottom half is between the 2 plates. So put the top plate back on and then run the bottom part through. This is why you wanted to have it taped down so that it doesn't move at all, because you don't want it to be crooked because the die moved during that when you slid it down a little bit. Okay, let's move the die cutting machine out of the way and see what we have. So you can see that that base piece comes out very easily. I start to take off the purple tape, and then I realize it just is going to pop out. So there you have it. That's what comes out of the die cut. You can see it has made 4 score marks in there. So now we're going to make the decorative squares on the top. So take the larger square, that is going to be your base plate, and you need to cut 4 of those. So I'm getting my die cutting machine back out. And for this one, I am going to use yellow cardstock. Put it down, put the square die on top, and then put the top plate on and run it through my cutting machine. I run it forwards and backwards, but you really don't need to go backwards because these thin cuts cut very nicely and you only need to do it once. So I'm going to cut 3 more. I'll speed it up so you don't have to watch me cut all 4 of them in real time, because I know that can get monotonous. You can see how nicely they come out there. Okay, I'm going to run the 3rd one through. Okay, and now 1 more. Now in this one, I was really pushing it because the paper was just slightly bigger than the die cut. So I decided to tape it down so that it didn't move, because if it moved at all, it would not have cut out the full square. So I did use a piece of purple tape on that last one, but again, just because it was cutting it really close to being able to fit in that spot. Okay, here are the 4 base squares. Now we're going to cut the top pieces, the one that you're going to stamp on or put the stickers on. You can use either the smaller square or the circle. I'm going to use the smaller square for these cards. Get my cutting machine back out, and I'm using white so that I am able to stamp on it or put stickers on it. Put the top piece on, and this one cuts very nicely again. Let's see what it looks like. Oh, a nice square, and it's got the scalloped edge and a little stitching around it. And you can see it fits perfectly on that base square. Just shows a little bit of the edge around the base square. So I need to cut out 3 more of these, and I will speed this up so that you don't have to watch me cutting that in real time. Our white daisy cardstock is so nice and smooth that it makes stamping so easy. So I love using it. Okay, I'm on the last one, and this one I don't have to worry about. There's plenty of room, so I didn't have to tape that last one down. Okay, so I'm going to move the die cutting machine, and let's look at what we have. I've got the 4 top squares that are going to go on our waterfall cards. Okay, look at how they nest together perfectly. They're scalloped together nicely with the stitch marks too. But again, the circle would work also. If you did the circle, you just would see a little bit more of the background. So if you used a pretty pattern paper to cut out those base squares, maybe you want to use the circle so you can see more of the pattern. Okay, let's start assembly. So I'm taking the card and I'm looking at what side I want. Close to my heart paper has dark on one side and light on the other. I decided I want to use the darker side. So whichever side you want, you're going to fold in towards that side. And then we're going to burnish along the score lines with a bone folder. Okay, I'm burnishing. Do all 4 of the pieces. And then you also want to do the bottom piece that's going to flip up. And that's the piece that is going to hold the card down. So I burnished it a little bit so it is nice and secure. Okay, you can start to see how it's going to come together. See how that kind of rolls? It reminds me of a roll top desk. Now there are 2 ways that you can put this card together. So I'm starting with the base card, and I put a decorative piece of paper on top. This card base is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So you can put this down where the little flanges stick out and you tape it down that way. Or you can fold them towards the back and tape the back part. So it depends if you want to be able to see that or not. But you only tape that little piece down. I prefer to do it this way with the flanges sticking out. I feel that you get a smoother roll that way. And I'm going to use score tape because I want that piece to be stuck firmly to my card base. Right? Because that piece is the only thing that is holding the card onto the base. So I'm going to use the score tape and then cut it at the end. Score tape holds very securely. Unfortunately, it's a little bit bigger than that piece of flange, so I'm going to cut just that very little bit off. And the reason that I take the time to do this is because you don't want that to get caught on that rolling piece as it goes underneath it. So I just make sure that I cut it off so that there's no stickiness that will make the rolling card stick to it. Looks like I missed a little piece, so I went back to cut that. If there is any piece sticking up, you can always tap it with a rosin bag so that it's not sticky anymore. Okay, now this piece is going to flip up. Don't flip it under, because if you flip it under, then you will have the bulky piece underneath, and that's where the bottom part is going to roll underneath it, right? And so as you slide the card down, it would rub up against that. So I recommend folding it upwards. Okay, I center it on my card and I make sure it's how I want it. You want it to be straight or it won't slide very well. And I'm going to stick it right down. Rub it, burnish it a little bit so that it sticks good on it. And so now you can see where that bulky piece is going to be towards the top, and it slides very smoothly underneath because there's nothing underneath that's going to hold it. Now those flanges are a little bit bigger than our normal card bases, so you're going to cut those little pieces off. If you had flipped it under and you're doing it that way, then you don't have to worry about cutting that off. Okay, now let's make our decorative pieces. I'm going to stick these on the bases first. If you prefer to stamp on your white pieces and then stick it on the base pieces, feel free to do that. Especially if you're using a stamp that is bigger than that square, you might want to stamp it first and then put it on top of the base. But the pieces that I'm going to stamp on there are smaller, so I'm not too worried about that. Okay, and then on the last piece, and I'm just using regular adhesive here. I'm not worried about those falling off the card as much. Okay, so there's the 4 pieces. Now I went ahead and stamped it because I figured you didn't want to watch me stamping all of those. I did leave one open so I can show you. But I'm going to use a zip strip to cover that flange piece so that it looks like I meant to do it. And normally I would put glue on the zip strip and then stick it down, but here I was trying to center the happy birthday right over it, so I used the adhesive on the flange part and then put the zip strip on top. If you do that, you want to be very, very careful that you don't get any stickiness outside of that flange. Okay, now we're going to put the decorative pieces on, and I will show you that on those ones I stamped with the distressed oxide ink pads. I used, on the last one, I'm going to use stickers, just to show you that you can do it either way. On the base one, I'm using a stickers to make the decorative piece. You want to be very careful though, that you don't want to put anything that is too thick. Like I wouldn't put a acrylic shape on there or anything like that because it will get caught as it's rolling over. So these ones, when I attach them to the base piece, I am going to use score tape on it just because they do have to flip over and go underneath the card, and I was just afraid that it would fall off if it wasn't held on securely. So I just went ahead and used the score tape. You can just try it with regular adhesive if you want to. It will work fine, but if it gets a lot of use, then maybe it is better to use a score tape. And again, I'm checking to make sure I'm putting the score tape at the top. Now you'll notice that I'm only going to stick these squares down by the very top. I'm not putting adhesive over the whole back piece because you want it to be able to flip up and over as you pull that piece down. So if you use score tape, just use the one piece at the top. If you're using adhesive, just run a strip along the very top. And now I'm going to rub it so that I know it's stuck securely to the base piece. And now I'm going to start at the bottom. So you start at the one that's going to be underneath, and you're going to put it right up against that score line. You don't want to put it over the score line, you want to put it up to it, because once it flips over, once it folds and you're pulling it down and it flips over, you don't want any piece of the square to stick over. Otherwise it will get caught. The second one, I'm going to do the same thing. Line it up. And sometimes it helps if you fold it a little bit so you can see actually where it's going to fold, and then put it up against where the fold is so that none of that square is sticking up over the fold. You want to make sure that these are nice and straight and lined up. Okay, this second to the top piece. Again, line it up with that score mark. And then the last one. I'm going to line it up. Oh, I have to burnish it a little bit because it wasn't sticking so well. Okay, line it up right up against the top, but not over. You don't want to go over the top, just right up to the top mark. Okay, there you go. I've got all the 4 pieces. Now I decided to use a piece from the border tabs. This is from the Creativity in Motion bundle. And what I like about it is there are words that tell people that this is interactive, that they need to pull it down. And I chose to put the ooh and ah on it because I think that this is amazing and it will make people go ooh and ah. I stuck the ooh and ah down on the piece first and then put my acrylic block on top. I'm using intense ink. There is a little hole in that bottom piece that you pull, and so that's why I wanted to line it up so that no part of the words were covered. So you can see it says ooh and ah on it. And you can see the little hole there. So there we have it. Let's see how it works. Oh, look how beautiful. I think I'm going to put a sentiment on the inside there. And I'm using the sentiment. This is from the July stamp of the month. It says, "For my beautiful friend," and I put a little butterfly on there since I have a butterfly on one of the decorative squares. So again, I'm lining it up where I want them and then putting my acrylic block down. And I'm going to ink it up with the intense black again. Now this is again something where you don't want to put anything that sticks up too much on here. So I wouldn't put like gems or acrylic shapes on this because it does have to slide underneath that little flange that you have there. So you want to keep this kind of simple and use a stamp. You can use one of our stickers, but our stickers are nice and thick, so if you do, make sure it's pushed down really well. Okay, there you have it. One more time where you can see the sentiment and see it going back in. I really love this card. And here are 4 different designs that I made. A Halloween, a Christmas, and then just some fun ones.